it's time to make our hazard. Over here, I'm going to click on 2D scene. I'm going to double click and change it to the name of our hazard, which I think is soaring platform, something like that. You can call it what you want, doesn't really matter. I'm going to call it soaring platform. And I immediately need to change the type of that node. You see I've got the basic node there, node 2D. I need to change it. So I control click and I go down to change type, and I want a static body 2D. So a static body goes in our game. It doesn't move, but it has collisions. We can interact with it, so it makes it perfect for our hazard. We need a few more things. I'm going to add an animated sprite. Animated sprite 2D. There we go. For this project, there are two different ways of animating something that we're going to look at. If we only need to animate a sprite, as we do here, then look, the clue is in the title. We have this animated sprite 2D node, which is going to do the job for us perfectly. Let's set that up before we go any further. So, animated sprite 2D, I've got a warning. Let's see what the warning says. A sprite frames resource must be created or set in the frames property in order for the animated sprite 2D to display frames. Okay, fairly obvious. With animated sprite selected, we go over to animation and it says sprite frames. And it's given us the warning because we haven't got any sprite frames. It says empty. So click on where it says empty. New sprite frames, click on that. And then click on sprite frames. Opens up our animation frames section down here. And we want to bring in some sprite frames. First, I'm going to change the name of my animation. This is where we create our animations over here. I'll change it from default. It's a soaring platform, so I'll just call it soar. You can call it what you want, but just double click, change the name. And then I want to bring in my sprite frames. So I've got this thing here, looks like a waffle. And if I mouse over it, it says add sprite frames from sprite sheet. So click on the waffle. And it's taken me into exactly where I want to be. But if you're not where you want to be, you want to go into assets, art, and sprite sheets, and then you click on soaring platform. That's the one we want. So I'm just going to double click, and it opens this select frames panel here. Okay, we've got a couple of jobs. Firstly, we've got to tell it how many horizontal, how many vertical frames we've got. Horizontal is first, so we got 1, 2, 3 horizontal. Now hang on, what we got? Horizontal is first, so horizontally we have 2 columns. There we go. Vertically, 1, 2, 3, we've got 3. And they look nice and neat. Still not going to work. We've got to select the frames that we want in our animation. So I'm going to shift click, and the animation basically goes in this direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the blade starts to move. It moves a bit more. It moves right across, and then it starts to move back. In the art assets, I believe these two and these two are duplicates. Okay, so we've got 4 different ones, and then we duplicate 2 to go back to the start. So with shift held down, I'm just going to select that, and that in that order. If you do it in the wrong order, it's fine. We can put it right later. But now I've got them selected, so I go add 6 frames. All right, and we have our soaring platform here. If I press play, which is here, our soaring platform starts to soar. But you can see it's kind of slow. So if we want to speed it up, cross out 5, change it to 15. Oh yeah, that's much better. So I've lost my animation panel, so I just click back on Animated Sprite 2D and I get it back. Okay, 15 frames per second looks good. We want autoplay on load, which is over here. So I click that. I've already got animation looping selected, but if it's not selected to loop, you need to click that. And that's it. That's it. That was almost too easy, the name of my channel. If you have got the sprite frames in the wrong order, or if you do it with your own art and get them in the wrong order, there's a bunch of tools up here you can use. So you can select things and then use these to move them backwards and forwards. So you've got move frame right, move frame left. So if I wanted to move that right, just click it and it swaps it. And now it looks weird. You see that? So I'm going to move it back. And now it's back to normal again. But you can use these to change the order of the sprite frames. And you can use these to insert blank spaces. So you can move things into those if you want to maybe smooth out your animation. But that's okay now for our animated sprite. So let's go back to Soaring Platform, the parent node. And we want a collision shape. So we go collision shape 2D. And there we go. And we get the warning that we don't have shape selected. So we go over to shape. We want a rectangle. And I want my rectangle to cover the bottom section of the platform, because this is just about bumping into the platform and not walking through it. That's what this collision shape allows us to do, okay? So at the moment, this node will sit in the scene and you can bump into it, but if you jump on top of it, nothing's going to happen. And so that isn't job done for us. We want it to deal some damage to the player if we come into contact with these soaring blades. For that, we need a thing called an Area2d. So with Soaring Platform selected as the parent, click on the little plus and we want Area2d. And I'm going to double click on Area2d and call it Player Detector. So Area2ds are used for detection. In this case, if the player enters the Area2d, we're going to place it on top of these blades here. The blades will start doing the player damage. That's what we're doing. Doesn't have to be for that. You can use it to play music when a player gets to a certain point in a level. Use it to open doors, things like that. But the Area2d is, yes, a good node to use for detection. Look, we've got the warning again because the Area2d needs a collision shape. So we need another collision shape. This time, we want player detector clicked because it's going to be the parent. Click the little plus. Collision shape 2D. Put it there. Right. It needs a shape. So you're probably getting a bit used to this now. And it's put it there. So I don't want it to overlap with the previous collision shape. I'm going to move it upwards. I'm going to move it outwards, but not as far as the previous one. I'm going to move the bottom up so it doesn't overlap. And I'm going to move the top down. That looks okay. I might move it down slightly. I might move the node down slightly. That looks good. That looks good. Let's zoom in. All right. So it's detecting the player. Might move it down a bit. Might move that down a bit. That's covering it quite well, isn't it? So we're not overlapping, but we're covering the blades quite well. All right. Now, before we start damaging the player, we need to just do some housekeeping. So what we need to do is sort out our collision layers. So back into Soaring Platform, we'll sort out our collision layers. We are not the player, so we unclick that. Remember the first section, this one here, is what you are. We are not the world. We are a hazard. All right, so click that. Who can we interact with? We can interact with the player. I think that's it. Yeah, we don't need to interact with the enemies. We don't need to interact with we don't need to interact with ourselves. Don't need to interact with the world. I'm just going to place the thing in the world. and we don't have to interact with any props. So that's good. So that's our soaring platform done. Player detector. So again, we are a hazard, and we can interact with the player. So that's fine. What I am going to do, I'm going to go back into soaring platform, and I'm going to say we can also interact with the enemies, because the top one is this collision shape here, and anything that bumps into it, we want it to stop. Okay, we don't want it to just go straight through the platform. So I'm going to make that interact with the player and the enemies, but we don't need to deal any damage to the enemies. They're not going to be jumping on top of our soaring block, so that's fine. So the soaring platform can interact with, it is a hazard, and it interacts with the player and the enemies. The player detector, again, is a hazard, but it can only detect the player. At this point, it would be a good idea to save our scene. So I'm going to do Command S to save, and I'm going to save it in hazards, soaring platform scene, that looks good, and just click save. Okay. Okay, how does it detect the player, and how does it deal damage to the player? In the next section, we're going to learn about signals, and that is how we are going to enable our hazard to damage the player. Hope to see you there.